But first, FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. March Madness is here, guys, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when their first $5 bet wins. That is $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories. You can even pick who's going to cut down the nets when it's all said and done. Just head over to FanDuel.com/UCSS and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. And with that, we are thrilled to welcome in the godfather of NFL film breakdowns. It is Greg Cosell of the NFL Network. How you doing today, Greg? Thanks so much for joining us.
Greg. Do we have Greg?
We had Greg.
I am here.
Greg. Hey, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
Good. It's been a minute, man. Good to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Dustin, it's always great to be with you. How's it going?
It's going great. I've sort of transitioned from radio into doing more of this podcast stuff, which is seems to be you can make some money working less. So that's what I'm doing now.
I wish I could do that. I think I've been working 7 days a week since like last August 15th or so. So I wish I could figure that out.
Man, you work 7 days a week for the last like 30 years of your life. You're a grinder, and that's why you're.
That's true.
You are, man. And we respect your knowledge and how much time you put into this more than anybody. I mean, we just sit here and talk about guys that we don't watch the tape on, but you do. We watch some tape. We watch game tape.
I can't compromise my process. That's my problem. I can't compromise my process because then I don't feel good about it.
Well, your process works. I mean, it's been proven because we've been having. I mean, shoot, I met you in 2011, and every year since then, man, you just keep nailing these picks, and not necessarily nailing the picks, but you nail the traits. You nail. What you see in these guys. You take out all of the other BS. You don't care about if they go to church or not. You know what I mean? You care about what they do on the field, right?
Well, that's why, Dustin, I always love, because obviously we all have to be on social media these days. I always love when people say to me, well, that's an interesting take. I mean, I don't do takes. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to be right about everybody because, hey, you and I could look at the tape of a guy and we could see it a little differently. But I don't do takes. Everything I say is based on watching the tape.
All right, so let's talk some tape. Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders. Like, I think all of us here on this show like Cam Ward more than Shedeur Sanders.
Yes. Yeah.
However, Brown sitting at 2, we're sort of I think talking ourselves into Shedeur Sanders more than Cam Ward at this point. Can you just give us your assessment of each player? I know it's kind of an open question there, but where do you lie with those two players?
Well, it's funny. I think when you look at players at any position, Dustin, you start with their traits, their attributes, their characteristics. And then there's other factors that obviously come into play. But I don't think anybody would argue that Cam Ward doesn't have higher level quarterback traits than Sanders. Mm-hmm. He's got a live arm. He's got a playmaking dimension. He can work effectively from the pocket at all three levels of the defense. He can sit on his back foot and drive the ball. I mean, he makes big-time NFL-type throws. Are there times when he's a little reckless, when he's a little undisciplined? And I'm certainly not making a direct comparison, so I don't want people to think I am. But I remember when Patrick Mahomes came out, one reason he was picked 10th was because there was a concern with him that there was a reckless, undisciplined nature to his game, and how would that play in the league? And obviously we've seen how that turned out. And as I said, I'm not suggesting that in 3 years we'll be saying Cam Ward's Patrick Mahomes. But there's no question that there is that element to his game that probably needs to be cleaned up. And sometimes that happens, Dustin, as you know, with experience. Mm-hmm. The guy starts playing and realizes, hey, I can do that, but I can't do that. Right. So you just don't know. But there's no question when you're dealing just with pure physical traits, throwing a ball, movement ability, Cam Ward would be clearly the #1 quarterback prospect in this draft.
Greg, I want to get to another top blue chip prospect. People say there's 3 or 4 maybe in this draft class. You take a look, we just talked about Cam Ward. There is Travis Hunter, but then there is Abdul Carter. When you watch him on the edge, he's, I believe, about 250 pounds. And based on your evaluations, what you've seen in edge rushers before, you have guys like Micah Parsons who played for Penn State. You got like Devon Millers, obviously the Myles Garrett at Texas A&M. He's a little bit bigger. Where would you put his skill set in terms of their skill sets when they were coming out, and how does he kind of project in terms of a every down, 3-down player?
Yeah, I think right now you're looking at a guy that is a tremendous athlete. I mean, he's got the size, the length, the athletic profile. I think one thing that he needs to work on, and I've learned this by talking to offensive linemen and hear what they tell me about players that they have to block. I think the one element of his game that must continue to develop is the power element. There's no question that he's bendy, he's flexible, he's explosive. That's all there. And that's not hard to evaluate. You just see it. He can get underneath offensive tackles. He can clear the top of the pass rush arc. He can flatten his rush path to the quarterback, which a lot of guys can't do. That's a trait that is really, really important, to be able to flatten your rush path and not just get pushed past the quarterback. But I think the power element of his game needs to continue to develop, and that may be because until this year he wasn't really an edge pass rusher. So, for instance, I know a lot of people make the comparison to Micah Parsons, and he was essentially, Carter was deployed in much the same way this year at Penn State as the way Parsons has been deployed with the Cowboys, but Parsons is a stronger, more powerful player at this moment in time. So that's the part of Carter's game that needs work, and it's a meaningful part of his game. You need a power element to be able to rush the quarterback in the NFL on a consistent basis.
Greg, when you go back to Shedeur Sanders here, when you look at his strengths and his weaknesses and your breakdown, in your opinion, what is the biggest weakness that he has that can hold him back from having success in the NFL? And then what is his strongest strength, so to speak, that can propel him to having much success at the next level?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to like about Shedeur Sanders. I mean, he's an easy, natural thrower, which you saw throughout his tape. I actually watched him for 3 years in a row because I kept thinking he was going to come out. And, of course, he didn't until this year. He's pretty precise with his ball location. That's a strength of his game. He's pretty much a pure pocket quarterback. I would say he's got a very good feel for the game. I think this, to me, he's the perfect kind of quarterback that raises the question of sort of a macro 30,000-foot view of the quarterback position in the league, because you're dealing with a pocket quarterback who has certain higher level traits in terms of ball location, understanding defenses, and those are traits, by the way, the same as we talk about arm strength. Those are traits. But he doesn't have a big arm. He needs the system to work for him. There are certain things he needs to clean up. And we know he didn't play behind a good offensive line. We all get that. But he has a really glaring tendency to retreat backwards when he feels pressure, which you cannot do in the NFL. And he also has a tendency to hold the ball with one hand when he feels pressure. That can be cleaned up. So you're dealing with a guy that is, and I hate to use this term, but everybody understands it. In many ways, he's a system player. And, of course, all quarterbacks are, but he will need a complete offense. He will need a run game. He'll need a good O-line. He'll need good receivers. He needs the passing game schematics to work for him. But he's a very easy thrower. He does throw the ball well on the run, but he's not a creator. He's not going to make plays outside of structure. He can certainly run the play-action boot game, but he's not necessarily going to make plays outside of structure. So, he's one of those, think of the Kirk Cousins type of quarterback. And I know some people might think, oh, Kirk Cousins, what's he? Well, for 5, 6, 7 years in a row, Kirk Cousins threw 35 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. And I imagine, let's say the Cleveland Browns drafted him and he threw 35 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. I think you guys might be pretty happy with that.
So a follow-up to what you just said, Greg, because you said, Shedeur is a guy that needs to be in a complete system. I talked to Brian Howell, who covers the Colorado Buffalo, and he spoke to the relationship that Shedeur has with Pat Shurmur. Now, we all know here in Cleveland, Pat Shurmur and Kevin Stefanski has a solid relationship. Do you think Shedeur Sanders will be a good fit, seeing the parallels from Pat Shurmur to Kevin Stefanski right here in Cleveland? Well,
look, Stefanski has a lot of experience with quarterbacks that, you would not say from a physical traits perspective would be high level. So I think a lot of people think that, hey, Shedeur would be, a nice fit for Stefanski. But then you need a run game. Who's the back this year? The O-line's been pretty good over the last couple of years. I assume it's still going to be pretty good. So that could work out very, very well. The way I would just describe Shedeur is he's an executor. He's an efficient executor and a ball distributor. And there's nothing wrong with that. He doesn't give you a playmaking dimension. It's easy to see the traits of Cam Ward and quarterbacks that have big arms and can make plays outside of structure. Sometimes it's a little more subtle and nuanced to see the traits of a Shedeur Sanders type of quarterback, whose game is not like that, but, who ultimately functions well as a pocket player. But as I said, he does need to clean a few things up. Keep one thing in mind. It's easy to always say that a quarterback who gets sacked a lot, that it's a bad O-line, and I'm not saying that the O-line was good at Colorado. It obviously wasn't, but teams have done studies through the years, and quarterbacks that get sacked a lot in college tend to get sacked a lot in the NFL. Look at Caleb Williams. Everybody said, "Oh, USC bad O-line, gets to the Bears, leads the league in quarterback sacks." So that's just something to be aware of. Again, it's not all on Shedeur Sanders, but he does have that tendency to retreat backwards, and that absolutely must be cleaned up.
Greg, I've got a question on two other quarterbacks that intrigue me in this draft. First, I'm start with Jalen Milroe. I'm enamored with his athletic ability, but I don't know if he can be a quarterback in the league. You tell me.
It's really funny. I watched him last summer, and I had some clear questions about Milroe, and which the tape told me. I mean, that's what I do. The tape speaks. I don't make this up. The tape speaks. And I thought that there were some clear things that needed to be worked on. In fact, I wrote down 4 things that had to be worked on. I said ability to recognize coverage, ability to process it quicker, where to go with the ball within timing and structure of the route concepts, ability to better navigate the pocket, and then, based on what happened this year, there was a sense, I think, I'm just seeing some games on Saturdays, there's a sense that, he was worse. I actually thought he was better, believe it or not, when I watched the tape, and I watched a lot of games. I thought that he showed some improvement in a number of those areas. Now, he's still not a precision and nuanced and subtle player, but the explosiveness in his game as a runner. A lot of people now have made the comparison to a Jalen Hurts, who's obviously hit the run element of Hurts, both by design and scrambling, which just demoralizes defenses. We saw that all year. We saw it in the Super Bowl, particularly in the third quarter. This guy is a commanding physical presence as a runner, which you rarely say about quarterbacks. He can take the design quarterback run game to another level, and that changes the numbers in the run game for the defense, changes the way, Dustin, this, it changes the way the defense has to play, 100%. And that's a big deal. That can't be overstated, by the way. We always think quarterbacks, they just got to throw from the pocket, and obviously they do, but that's a huge factor in the NFL now. The quarterbacks that can move by design, it really changes the geometry for the defense.
Mahomes can move better than a lot of quarterbacks. Allen is a huge runner. Two-time MVP, Lamar Jackson, he's one of the most dynamic players we've ever seen. It's like that. That's why I think I'm intrigued with Milroe. I think that he could do some of that stuff.
And it's very possible. And I think that's going to be the discussion in draft meetings. Right. It's easy to look at Milroe and say, gee, he's not a precision passer. That's easy to say. Everybody, any scout worth his salt is going to know that. And like I said, I thought he was a little better this year, but he's certainly not at the level you would want him to be as an NFL quarterback.
All right.
But the other elements of his game are really intriguing, and they're tough for a defense to defend. It's a big deal. When you line up in the gun on almost every play, and there's a back right next to you, first of all, you have the zone read element option on every single play, and the defense has to be aware of that. They've got to have an extra defender who's ready to be a box player and to defend the quarterback, and that just changes the whole symmetry and geometry of how defenses have to play. Look, you played in college a number of years ago. I'm sure there were more running quarterbacks then. Maybe there weren't. I can't remember, but
we had to change our entire defense in the 2003 Fiesta Bowl because L. Roberson was a hell of a runner for Kansas State. We put in this whole defense that we never ran before.
Right. I mean, yeah, and you got it now. That's becoming more and more part of the NFL. So look at someone like Joe Burrow. Now, Joe Burrow at his core is a pocket quarterback. Obviously, he's got an unbelievable feel for the pocket, and he's a better athlete than people give him credit for. But as a pocket quarterback, he is so high level, pre-snap and post-snap, which almost gets back to the point I was, when we were talking about Shedeur. If you're essentially a pure pocket quarterback, do you have to be so high level, or can you not really play now in this league at a high level anymore because defenses have changed and become so good that if you don't have any kind of second reaction outside of structure ability, is it just too hard to play?
Mm-hmm. Hey, last question for me, and before G. Bush has a really important question. Jackson Dart from Ole Miss. I don't know what to make of him because of the system and basically that. I mean, the system. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that because I think that Dart. I made it a point when I watch these guys, like with Dart, for instance, they ran a lot of pro stuff. I mean, it's easy to say, it's Lane Kiffin, and it doesn't relate to the NFL. But there were a lot of pro concepts. I mean, Dustin, you know this. There's not 1,000 route concepts. I mean,
right.
You end up running a lot of the same stuff. Look, he played in that offense for 3 years, okay? It was evident from his tape that he was really comfortable, composed. He had a really refined understanding of the schematics of that system. It was no-huddle tempo. More often than not, it did eliminate a lot of pre-snap research of the defense. But that's the way quarterbacks are being brought up now with all these pure progression reads. That's not abnormal these days. These young quarterbacks starting 10, 11 years old, everything is pure progression. They're not taught anything about the defense at all. I mean, it's just, hey, here's your primary, here's your secondary. If one's not open, it doesn't matter why he's not open, just go to two. So these guys aren't really taught about defense. So it's not progression reading in a strict sense because the defense is forcing you to progression read. I would say that there were a lot of basic one read throws, but there were also a good amount of staple NFL route concepts. I think with Dart. I think he's a pretty good athlete. I think he can execute the design quarterback run game situationally. He can get out of the pocket. I think the questions with him, some arm strength limitations, and again, that's a relative term. People debate arm strength all the time. I always feel like arm strength, doesn't matter until it matters. So, you can debate that forever. He doesn't have much experience with the pre-snap phase of the game, which, becomes really important in the NFL. Another guy that I think needs to be an efficient ball distributor. I think that's ultimately what he would have to be. And I do think his legs can be a factor, but I think ultimately he's a ball distributor and an executor of an offense. So in many ways, he's like Shedeur, but probably lowercase.
Greg, I almost forgot my question here. They had to text it to me because I've been just so dialed in on the rest of the content and the rest of these questions. I've been soaking up all this knowledge about these prospects. We forgot to mention the guy who just accidentally won the Heisman. Man, Travis Hunter, it's crazy because it's almost like, we were talking to Sean King the other day, and he said, it's almost like we saw him too much and we just get kind of desensitized to how good he is. In your opinion, when you watch Travis Hunter, is he a one of one in terms of doing both things well? And more importantly, is he a receiver on tape or a cornerback on tape, and he's just good at either or? What position would you have to put him down? Like, hey, this is a corner or this is a receiver?
Well, I'll give you my pointless point of view on that. I think he's ultimately going to play corner in the league and then be used in packages as a receiver. That's how I think he'll be deployed in the NFL. It's much easier to find receivers than it is to find big-time corners. So I think that he'll play corner. And I think he's a really good corner prospect. I mean, he's obviously got ridiculous hands. He can catch everything. He's an explosive athlete. Now, I will say this, and some might disagree with me. and this is just a tape statement. So, as I said, I like to think reasonable minds disagree. I'm not one of those guys that thinks I'm right. Just, I sit here all day and watch tape, but I don't think I'm right all the time. I don't think he's the same level of prospect as a corner as, let's say, Patrick Surtain was when he came out. But I think he's a really good corner prospect. Dustin, I don't know how you feel, but I don't think he can play 140 snaps a game in the NFL. And not just because of the nature of the game, but because of the preparation during the week. He can't sit in on all these there's not enough time. It's not just, can he go out and catch a tunnel screen? Sure. But a lot of guys can do that. And he's obviously dynamic with the ball in his hands and theoretically could take it to the house any time. We know that, as we're seeing right now. The guy's an explosive athlete. But, he can't be heavily involved on both sides of the ball in what's involved in the preparation. So I think he's going to end up being a corner as his primary, and I think there'll be packages for him as a receiver.
I tend to agree. I played with Chris Gamble, opposite side of Chris Gamble in college, and he ends up going to the league, first-round pick. Has a nice career as a corner. And really, all-pro corner. So I tend to think that's where Travis Hunter will be. But we'll see. Greg, you're the best, man. Thanks so much for coming on. Your time, your effort, it shows, man. It's the best.
Appreciate it, Dustin. Thanks for having me. Love being with you guys.
Good to see you, man.
Appreciate you.
Yeah. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate you, man.
That was the legendary Greg Cosell,
Legend.
by the way. Not just Greg Cosell. That is the legendary, the godfather of NFL film. So we appreciate Greg coming on today and spending a few minutes with us. Before we jump to Guardians, any final thoughts on what we heard from Greg, guys?
He called Shedeur Sanders a elite level pocket passer.
He did.
And, he had Joe Burrow's name in his mouth with that. And to me, it sounds like a dude that can run Kevin Stefanski's system. It seems like a lot of guys view Travis long-term as a better corner than wide receiver. I have heard comps all the way up to Chap Bailey when it comes to how good he can be at the corner position. It's always crazy just to sit back and watch Greg do his thing, man. He's really an OG. He really gets in the minutia of everything and kind of figures shit out. So that was dope.
Honestly, man, like his stuff on Milroe, it doesn't necessarily make me think that Milroe is going to be like some like Hall of Fame quarterback, but it does make me think more about how much teams need to have the ability to run from the quarterback position and how much more stress it puts on defenses by having to have to worry about the idea that, hey, this dude can literally take off and go on every single snap. So that's fascinating to me. The Jackson Dart stuff was good too, because I just thought Lane Kiffin was just like this,
I did too.
Spread offense, whatever. But he talks about the pro concepts that he ran for 3 years, not just 1 year, but the last 3 seasons. So that was good stuff.
Yeah, I thought what came off was, just the balanced look at the prospects, right? Not like being like, oh, I like this guy, so the other guy sucks. No,
right.
Like it's like, nah, like everybody has some things they need to work on and some things they get better at. The thing I took away from was that if you are going to have Shedeur Sanders, you got to have a lot of stuff with it. It can't be I think one of the things that Kevin Stefanski probably will look back at and say, the way we ran the offense last year when we was dropping back, throwing the ball, and people was questioning, why are you throwing the ball when Deshaun Watson is struggling? The offensive line is not built and equipped to be dropping back 40 times. Mm-hmm. I think, they're doing, if I'm reading the tea leaves and if I go back and we look forward and look back and say, okay, they did take Shedeur Sanders, we'll look back and say, oh, well, they did get Tevin Jenkins. They did bring in another offensive line. They didn't move Wyatt Teller. They kept all their offensive line because at the end of the day, they, every year for the last couple of years, it seems like the Browns have been bringing in linemen off the street. It looks like they've kind of invested a little bit in that position group. And one thing too, I couldn't get to it because you had so many other stuff. But Dustin, man, you got an opportunity to get a nice running back in this class. Mm-hmm. You got a nice opportunity. I was watching the kid from UCFF, Harvey. Yeah. I like him too.
I did one of his games.
There's a lot of running backs in this class, so you got an opportunity.
Penny Boone transferred from Toledo to UCF, thought he had a job, and then Harvey's like,
I know,
nah, man, sit the bench, bro.
Yeah, tight ends. I'm looking to see, We need another tight end in this game. Like right now, we got David Njoku, but that's it on the roster. When we were rocking and rolling, we were getting multiple tight ends. He had 2, 3, 4 tight ends, fullbacks, even fullbacks sometimes. So there's going to be some stuff that they need to get along with Shedeur Sanders if it's going to work.
I think that's a given though, right? And I get it. Some quarterbacks might need more than others, but Jim Brown said this, and I've said this plenty of times. I'll never forget that quote. You need all 11 parts on said side of the ball moving in the right direction for you to have success. So it's not like any quarterback is going to be able to be successful without having some really quality players at certain positions. I think the Cleveland Browns, they've done a decent job of addressing positions of needs. They might not be guys who, names that we know, but they can be impact players, especially on the offensive line. I think the Cleveland Browns can use another wide receiver. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with Elijah Moore, but you want to put whatever quarterback that you have on this roster in the best situation to be successful, whether it's Shedeur Sanders, Kenny Pickett, or whomever that veteran bridge quarterback that we don't know to be yet. So,
yeah, Greg was awesome. Dustin, thank you for getting Greg on.
You're
and
welcome.
when it comes to Shedeur and/or whoever, you need weapons. You need an offensive line. No quarterback can win by himself. Look at the Super Bowl for an example. And if you don't have the elite arm strength that Shedeur may lack and a guy like Josh Allen may have, you just have to be really good at the other stuff. And it seems like everyone we've spoken to thinks Shedeur has the capabilities to make a lot of the throws, but also it's the elite mentals that make him an intriguing prospect. So we'll see how that continues to unfold as we get closer and closer to the first round of the draft. But with Jimmy Haslam attending Cam Ward's private workout, I'm sure he's going to do something similar with Shedeur. The Browns are getting a quarterback. I feel pretty good about that at number 2.